Hi everybody and welcome back to Gamertag Stories YouTube channel. After my 6-month review of the Steam Deck, I thought it'd be nice for us to look at the emulation side. I don't emulate everything, but I have Game Boy, Game Gear, Super Nintendo, Mega Drive. You can see the list here. So we're just going to take a look through all of them, see how each one of them actually runs. This isn't a guide on how to run your emulator or install that stuff. This is just looking at the performance side of things. So first off is the Game Boy. The Game Boy runs at a smooth 60 FPS, you can see it here, the sound is great, everything's really nice. I apologise for the gameplay, it's quite hard to actually play your Steam Deck from behind the camera, so I'm normally a better gamer than this, so please excuse me through the terrible gaming you're about to see on all of these consoles. Next up we have the Game Boy Color. Similar to the Game Boy, it runs really smoothly. Once again, I apologise for my terrible gameplay here. That's not what you want from a gamer, is it? But a lot of the older systems, Master System, Game Boy, Game Gear, 16-bit, 32-bit, 8-bit, they run absolutely perfect. It's only later on we have a few issues, but everything I've got here, and you'll see on this video, does run pretty smoothly. There's a few things I'll pick up on later. But for now, let's take another look at some Game Boy Color. Next up, the Game Gear. I loved the Game Gear back in the day. And Shinobi 2, this is one of my favourite games. I recently completed it. Once again, like the previous two, 60 FPS, runs really well, the sound is great. Let's sit back and enjoy this gameplay. Next up we have the Master System, a great 8-bit system, and a game called Ghost House. I remember playing this at my friend's house all the time. I was terrible, and I'm still terrible, but this yet again runs at a nice 60 frames per second. Let's have a listen and a look. Onto the 16-bit era, and we're starting with Donkey Kong Country. Fantastic Super Nintendo game, a classic, and yet again runs at 60 frames per second on the Steam Deck, runs really smoothly. If you are looking to do some emulation and you love that retro gaming, I really recommend the Steam Deck. I know there's other things out there, but it runs so smoothly, and it's such a fantastic game with great music. The visuals are fantastic. Yet again, I'm going to keep saying it, I apologise for my terrible gameplay. I'm normally a much better gamer than this. Let's have a listen to the music and a look at the bonus level coming up here. Next up we have Sonic the Hedgehog on the Mega Drive, Sonic 3 actually. Again, this runs as the same as the Super Nintendo, 60 frames per second. Colours really pop here, and it's such a pretty looking game, and I really can't recommend the Steam Deck enough for your emulation. So we're now onto the 32-bit era, and we're looking at Silent Hill here on the PS1. The PS1 is where I started to have a few issues. Most games run at 60 frames per second, but some games didn't run at all. And I'm not sure it's just if the files that I've got, but majority of them ran fine, and they look great, they play great, but some of the games just didn't seem to run. Silent Hill does, Resident Evil 3 didn't, but Resident Evil 2 did. So I'm not sure if that's just a personal thing I might need to look at. But as you can see, it's a fantastic looking experience still. I have a wide variety of N64 games. All of them run really, really smoothly, 60 frames per second. And it's fantastic to be able to play these classic games on handheld. Mario Kart 64 here, running fantastic. Yet again, I apologise for my terrible steering, but just to give you a good overview, the Steam Deck is fantastic for N64 games. Into the PS2 era here, I have about 15 to 20 PS2 games, and they all run really, really well. So San Andreas here is running about 50 FPS. My driving's terrible, by the way. Luckily, I drive better than this in real life, but most games on the PS2 run between 50 and 60 FPS. I've not had any issues with any of the ROMs that I have. So if you're looking for a great PS2 experience, then the Steam Deck is really, really good. Continuing our 128-bit systems, we have the GameCube, which runs at 50 to 60 frames per second. Time Splitters 2 here, absolutely classic game. If you want to jump back in, I really recommend it. I'm going to be recommending all of them really. There hasn't been that many issues overall, but every game I've got for the GameCube has worked perfectly. Good news for Dreamcast fans, the Dreamcast also runs really, really smoothly. 60 frames per second here on House of the Dead 2, a classic arcade shooter. You can see in the bottom left there's a few kind of issues with the ground, but that doesn't happen all the time and doesn't happen on every game. It can be a little bit distracting, but it pops in and out every now and then. But if you're looking for some classic games, highly recommend it.
My God.
Don't come! Don't come! Go away! Please, help him! Don't kill me!
If you've got a PSP or you want to play some PSP ROMs, that also runs really, really well. Playing Tekken 6 here and runs at 60 frames per second. Actually runs smoother than the PS2 from what I found. I love Tekken. Playing Tekken 8 at the moment actually, but I've got about 10 or 11 PSP games, God of War, Siphon Filter, Tekken. They all run really, really well. The console that I have that probably has the biggest issues is the PS3. Here we're playing Alien vs Predator, and it's running at 60 frames per second. This runs really well, but things like MotorStorm and a few other games I do have issues with. So on the PS3 side, you can customize certain settings to get games running faster and smoother. I haven't done this here. Everything I've got is just running out of the box. And so it's kind of hit and miss with PS3 games. You can find lists of ones that work, but not all of them work. And last but not least, we have some MS-DOS games. So here you might have to do some configuration with the settings to get the controller working. But they run at 70 FPS and you can play all those classic 80s and 90s games if you're that old like me. Thanks for sticking around. I hope this gives you a little bit of insight if you're looking at doing some emulation on your Steam Deck of what you can and can't play. Again, I haven't got everything, but I'll try and do some more later on. Thanks so much for sticking around, and I'll see you soon.